Hey, here in Chapter 8, I think it's a lot more stuff that you're going to like and be able to grab onto and make sense to you. And some of the topics like parenting and homelessness and, Head Start, title, child abuse, bullying, suicide, substance abuse, all things that you're more familiar with, be more reality. And it all deals with working with parents. It's a part of teaching that we don't tell you about, that a lot of you are called to the teaching field. You can't wait to work with kids, but you get us with it. The parents, lots of us in our attitudes and habits that you've picked up from listening to me are way more vast and different than kids, and yet you get all that too. And I never think there's enough time to get to know teachers and work with them, and so it's kind of an ongoing thing. But it's a big part of teaching that we don't prepare you well enough for. You'll take a course actually in working with parents, but this is your introduction to it, working with the families and parents. And it looks a little bit like some of the others, but it's stuff that you can grab onto that'll be meaningful to you, and I hope at the end of this you have some insight that you didn't have to begin with. Chapter 8, Families. Chapter 8, Students and their Families. Here's the learning outcomes, and I have these on the wiki site also, but it's about different backgrounds, different ages. Really a pretty good go at it here. I found this interesting right away. Today's families changed dramatically in the last 60 years, and I'd say more than that. In the 50s, the norm was a working father and mother at home with 2 more school-age children. Today, we have few mothers remain at home until their children finish high school, and I would say fewer. I guess in my world there's more of that that's still in that 60s model, but for the most part it seems like in our schools that we approach it as if that's not the norm. That's not the case. I felt in a lot of cases, like for example the first school my kids went to, that it was really set up for that model for those mothers that were at home, and so that was kind of a challenge. But look at all the different things today, and I'm going to ask you to bring these in here. Significant shifts in family culture in the 50s, single-parent home, stay-at-home dads, other arrangements. Here, I want you to bring all these arrangements in. This is number 1, and here they are. Listen to this. Mothers working with fathers stay at home, that one with children, that one's there. Single-parent families, families with 2 working parents, that's us, this family. Remarried parents, childless families, childless marriages, families with adopted children, gay and lesbian parents, extended families, grandparents raising grandchildren, and unmarried couples raising children. And so this would be number 1. Here is all those dynamics that we just mentioned from page 198 on today's families. Okay, that's number 1. I want you to include all those in there so you have a handle of it. To keep the diversity of families, I say, so not only culture, but the families are very diverse from what they were 40 and 50 years ago. The emphasis here, of course, will be on culture, but the family has dramatically changed in the way we communicate. Parents are generally older than in the past because they marry later, and I'm going to push on that a little bit. The reason isn't always because they marry later. Part of it is that they're just putting off childbearing. We're still having children at a young age. Now marrying doesn't have as near as much to do with having children. You'll see the statistics a little bit later, how many children are born to unmarried people. So marrying later to me doesn't have the effect on that. It's just overall people delaying childbirth. 1 in 4 of today's young people under 30 years of age has been married. Okay. And in your world that maybe seems a little off, but 1 in 4. I was 26 when I got married. I was almost 40 when my oldest was born. So there was a gap. So we probably would still destroy this curve here, this bell-shaped curve. Most men and women work a number of years before marrying. However, they do not always stay married to the same person. And I say, and part of it is we couple up, we move in together long before we marry. And so I think this is a little misleading here about we work before we get married. I know lots of couples that are starting their families before they're married. They move in at the same age as we always did. As my parents got married, both were 20, I believe, or my dad was 21. And I say now people just move in together and start their families within a couple of years of that before they marry. I've attended, as have you, lots of weddings where the children, the little children, are at the wedding. I had a niece that had 2 children with the same man before she got married to him. So anyway, it just changes dynamics of families, and it says, of course, and as you're well aware of, we don't stay married to that same person. Less than half of the marriages, not half the people, half the marriages ended in divorce. And so it continually changed, and then it gets a little more complicated, as you know, when we remarry somebody else that has kids. Parents who live in separate households but have joint custody, a step-parent, other family members are non-related. Of course, non-related for the most part means mom's boyfriend living there, which we have too. 7, this highlight here, 7 in 10 children under 18 live with 2 parents. 7 in 10, that's high, but some of that is not their mom and dad. It often can be a stepfather or stepmother. But still, that's a higher number than I would have expected. That's 7 out of 10. Almost 1 in 4 U.S. children lives with his or her mother only. Okay, and again, I thought it would have been higher than that. 1 in 4, which is 25%. And again, I'm going to ask you to bring these in here, of these different statistics on page 199. This will be number 2. And again, the reason I'm having you do this is I just want you to have a nice set of data here about what these family structures look like. So I want you to start it up here about marrying later. This one here, 1 in 10 live with 2 parents, even though it might be stepfather. 1 in 4 only live with their mother. Here's another one I want you to bring in. 3% live with their father. And African American children are more likely than children from other groups to live with a single mother. Okay, and ideally, it would be advantageous for children to have 2 caring and loving parents to nurture them. However, children from all types of families are academically successful in school, become well-adjusted adults, and that's what comes to you. As you, as the teacher, do not get to judge this. You do not get to weigh this. Those children come to your class regardless of these family structures. They deserve and demand your love and respect and encouragement just as anybody else. And this chapter is going to make a case for that. But I'm a little put out the insinuation that you wouldn't put here. I'm going to push on this more later, but that's the insinuation throughout this chapter, is that you wouldn't do this. That family, it's not the type of family that disadvantages students to make it difficult for them to adjust. The factor that is most correlated with such disadvantage is economic well-beings of the family. Those in poverty are more likely than their affluent peers to have problems in school. And I'm telling you that it'll be the theme through the whole chapter. And so again, I want you to put that here also. All those things here. The most likely to have problems in school, all sorts of problems, are from the economically disadvantaged homes. And again, still, you do not have the right to judge that. And those kids are going to need you more than the others. And I don't care if you're teaching high school classes or kindergarten, those kids will have more challenges and deserve you more. Okay. Let's go into parenting. This is more here. Teachers must respect, value diversity of families, not family types impacts teachers' expectations. This is what I say. Your expectations are the same, and that is to lift up kids. And my kids need this too. They need a different kind, but my kids need connection to their teachers now. As they're older than they did before. And there's no doubt it's more of a challenge for you to connect with people that are not like you and not like me, but they all need that. And I say even the middle-income white kids like mine need that connection to their teachers, but I think some of these other kids need it more. All right, parenting, they sets the stage for future learning. Reading and limiting television exposure improves literacy. Monitoring, learning have impact. And teachers have collaboration necessary. And it talks about here is not all those different things that come involved. Often parents draw from their own experience as children and adults. However, it's different today. And it talks about how it's different than it was a few years ago. Cell phones, textings, avatars, chat rooms, MySpace, Facebook, YouTube, wikis, tweeting, all didn't exist not just too long ago. And I agree with that to a certain extent. That really has changed it. I still think experiences we draw on from when we were growing up still are valuable, but it's different now because of technology. But the most critical thing is parents, and my point here is you don't get to change that. And that's to me, we overemphasize this. Nobody, everybody knows that, but I worked with tons of families that I couldn't get parents engaged. I couldn't get parents to step up. And I taught in middle school, low-income middle school, and so a lot of these parents have really formed ingrained habits by then of not participating in their children's schooling, and for a variety of reasons. I could spend 2 days telling you about that, but nonetheless, they still need you and deserve you through that. This is interesting here. Reading to young children and limiting amount of time watching TV have a strong relationship to reading scores, and you don't ever get to see the stats from that. You see it's not cited here, but most of us believe it to be true. And by age 4, children with professional parents have a much larger vocabulary. And of course, what that comes from, also most of the time parents that are from middle income have education and use a bigger vocabulary, and so children pick up on that. And let's go way back to what we've talked about a number of times. Vocabulary is still power. Vocabulary gives you the ability to read and read more fluently. And this is where reading to kids at an early age does. It gives kids vocabulary, gives them words. And what we can't agree on is what to do. What to do with kids come from low-income homes where they don't get that access to good vocabulary, to big vocabularies. And again, is it money? I talk about this every chapter. Is it money? Is the inference here that we need to throw money at this? I don't know. And I don't know there's a simple solution. There's not a simple one, or we would have already found it. But it's your awareness, you, the teachers, they're going to make the difference here. That's what you're up against. And again, like I say, you'll quickly pick up on which kids that don't have that vocabulary, don't have that background. So access to such things as books, computers, internet also contribute to academic success. Parent involvement in school activities and ensure the homework is done also correlate with good grades. And again, this is not rocket science. You know that. But my point here is, and going through all this is, if that's not happening in homes, you don't get to change it. You're just changes how you're going to approach things. Teachers need to work together. Parents and teachers need to work together. And then there's economic stress, of course. Families continue to suffer a recent recession. A number of them have lost their jobs or worry about losing their jobs. Teachers report that more students are coming to school hungry. And all I can say to that is my kids would report that also, even though they have breakfast. This is an interesting stat here I have highlighted. 7 in 10 parents and 65% of the students worry about their family having enough money to cover basic needs. And that's I'd like to know that. So I looked this up, this MetLife study, 2012. Let me just take you there. It's very interesting. First of all, you know who MetLife is. It's an insurance company, and they have quite a long thing here. But they apparently talked to 1,000 teachers, and this is what you do with research. In this whole chapter, they basically embedded. This whole chapter is based on this study. But one of the things I found was interesting in the study is the teachers were paid to participate. They were paid to participate. And what I can't seem to find here is where did they find this cross-section of teachers? Because I got to believe that this group does not represent a cross-section of people, because I go back here and say that seems like a high number. 7 in 10 parents and 65% of students worry about family having enough money to cover basic needs. And again, maybe it's my shallowness, maybe it's my insulation from the real world, but that seems like a very high number. And as I looked at this, I couldn't find where they got this group that just said cross-section of 1,000 teachers and 500 principals that they asked. And so how does that change things in school? And it's I forget how many pages. It's 100 and some pages here that they find, but this MetLife is exactly the MetLife you think it is. It's the insurance company doing this study. And so I can't quite figure out what their angle is here, but all through it, they have it sprinkled through here. And like I say, I couldn't find exactly how they drew these teachers, but the numbers to me seem a little skewed, and I hope they are, because that seems like a lot to me, that it's 65% of these 1,000 teachers. But I say the teachers were paid to come onto this. I'm going to guess that they really picked these out of low-income schools or certain neighborhoods. I can't imagine it's a cross-section across the country. I think it's dramatically different here in the Plains, but I don't know that to be sure. But I know economic stress is a big thing. 2 in 3 teachers report that the number of students and families needing health and social support has increased over the past years. Yes, the economic downturn in the last 5 years have reduced, districts have reduced and limited those services along with after-school programs as part of their budget cutting. In this section, we examine how limited family incomes affect families and schooling of their age. And okay, you look at this MetLife 2012 all through here, that this is their source for all their information. You won't hardly see much beside that. And that's just where they asked these 1,000 teachers that were paid to participate. And yeah, I'm just going to let it go at that. So homelessness, and that's a whole nother thing. Recessions, coming to school hungry, 7 of 10 worry about their family having enough to cover basics. School districts have reduced, eliminated many health and support services. I wish they would have labeled those. As I looked through here, I could not find any place where they labeled what was cut, which I don't. To me, it's kind of a blank statement. As I go through here, so that's what comes. But homelessness. Here, causes, homeless children, homeless youth, homeless students in school. So I'm just going to come back and just talk about some of those things. That more than 3 million people in the United States are without shelter at some point during a year. And many more families are just a paycheck away from that. Many low-income families spend 50% of the income on rent rather than recommended 30%. And so the point being that it's very hard to find affordable income on low incomes. Include youth, children, people with disabilities, veterans, people using illegal drugs, people with mental health problems, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that was a huge one, is mental health problems. Or people who do not earn enough to rent housing. Life is very rough when living on the streets. Homeless people are physically attacked and suffer disproportionately from health and mental problems, yes. So what is the cause? Cause of homelessness? Yeah, the number one thing is unemployment, of course, and just stuff that they can afford. Growing number in decreasing government support and domestic violence. And again, please show me the stats on that. A job doesn't necessarily guarantee housing, and you would know that. 3 in 10 members of homeless populations have jobs, but employment is part-time or sporadic adults earning wages too low to purchase necessary food, clothing. A full-time minimum wage job often does not provide enough income for a family to rent a one-bedroom home. And the thing I think there, you guys, I don't think it was ever intended. People making minimum wage was never intended. Minimum wage was a training job for young people until they get started in their careers. It's peculiar to me that we're trying to support families on minimum wage jobs. Was never the intent of it. And we can raise that. We can double it. We could double the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, and it would not allow families to support their themselves on that wage. But it would price out a lot of young people out of jobs that wouldn't be able to. People wouldn't hire them because of how high that is. So minimum wage was always a training wage, not a living wage, and now we're trying to make a living wage, and so we take it to it. Decreasing government supports and domestic violence also contribute to a growing number of homeless families. Here in the highlight, homeless families comprise about 1/3 of the homeless population. And so 1/3 of the people that are homeless, and it doesn't always mean live in the streets, it just means they don't have a permanent residence. And figure 8.1, I think, is down here, is who they are. and it gives a biggest homeless mothers who have been physically abused tends to happen. We have lots of shelters, but they don't always access them. So there's a breakdown of who they are. Generally in the late 20s, they have a demographics here. Mother of a homeless family is generally in her late 20s with 2 young children. Over 9 and 10 of them already have been the victims of violent incidences. And again, unless you've been asleep for 25 years, you know this. Homeless mothers are more likely than other mothers to have lived in foster care earlier in their lives. Is that interesting? They're homeless now. They were more likely to be on foster kids when they were growing up. So look at how that's perpetuated from generation to generation. Let me go on here. They and their children suffer from chronic health problems such as asthma, anxiety, and depression. Homelessness is devastating to families who are sometimes separated from partners and their children. Only 65% of homeless mothers live with at least one of their children. Only 65%. In other words, the children are taken away or living someplace else. Often the children get help, and they have some other problems, and that's not broken down here. 7% homeless men, only 7% of them live at least with one of their children. What happens is often this parent that's living homeless has some mental health issues, prevents them from caring for the children. So the children are taken into the system, into the government system, and the mother either isn't or refuses to. And this is what often comes up here that we don't talk about is often there's mental issues. The government has changed the regulations so that it's much, much harder to get people committed that have mental health issues. And, there was a time where you and anybody could get somebody committed and get that help they needed. You could fill out paperwork to get them in there. We found then people abused that system where they were sticking elderly parents in so they could get at their money. So the laws were changed. So now it's very, very hard. So if somebody's mentally ill and they don't want to be committed for treatment, they don't have to be. And this is what I found. I worked with homeless people 25 years ago, and a high percentage of them were mentally ill and absolutely did not want to be part of any kind of a system. For one thing, if you're mentally ill, you often don't know that you have a problem. You think the rest of the world does. Here, homeless children may be placed in foster care or left with relatives or friends while their families are experiencing homelessness. And I say part of that is also these homeless people often are addicts. Doesn't come into the discussion here, but they're often high incidence are addicts, alcoholics, drug addicts, and stuff. So again, why they're not living with one of their children is because the children are taken away because they're addicts. And this goes on to homeless children. More than 1.6 million are homeless at some time during the year. Many suffer from inadequate health and are surrounded by disease. Well, you can imagine if you're out there that's happening. More than 1.6 million children every year at night. About 200,000 have no home. Many are staying in shelters at night, doubling in homes and friends and relatives. Nearly half the homeless children are under the age of 6. Homeless youth have this most often homeless because they have run away from home and been released from foster care, and they run away. And I worked with tons of kids that were run away, called CHINs, child in need of supervision. They would just disappear, and sometimes it was things at home were so bad, but more often I saw juveniles that were delinquents, were already addicts, and therefore they wanted to run and feed their addiction. This can be a primary reason, but there's others, and sometimes this can lead to those other problems also. Few homeless youth stay in shelters because of admission policies and other obstacles. Instead, they sleep in abandoned buildings and the streets or with other people, and they have difficulty finding jobs to earn money if they need so. They end up exchanging sex for money, increasing their chance of contracting AIDS or HIV. And of course, anybody, when you get in this realm whatsoever, the first casualty is going to school. The first casualty of it is going to school. And so when you go to school, it can be encompassing. You've got all these things in your life. The last thing you're worried about is going to school. They're not fare well. Their classmates in life or in schools are showing. However, some homeless students are very resilient and able to maintain. Moving frequently is a characteristic of low-income families. With many of them moving to different housing annually or more often, because often they're in subsidized housing. That's a change. A A lot of them, it's income-based housing, so you can move in, and as soon as you lose your job, you lose that place. So that it creates a lot of instability, and sometimes you're able to stay in the same school, but sometimes not. And so, of course, that's a ongoing thing. They face barrier regularly attending schools, such as lack of transportation, lack of school supplies, lack of clothing. If you're always moving, your clothes don't always keep up with you, and you probably don't have nice clothes. And, of course, a big one that I saw often, too, is poor health. You're not eating regularly, but more so than not eating regularly, I saw kids that weren't sleeping regularly. So then although the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act was passed in '87, eliminated the residency requirement. Homeless children sometimes are not allowed to attend the school that would best serve their needs. Almost 9 in 10 of the nation's homeless students are enrolled in school, although less than 1 in 4 attend regularly. So they're enrolled, they just don't get there, and for these reasons up here. So let me take you back here. I'm going to, let's see, where did we leave off here? We're only on number 3, and I'm going to ask you right here to bring this in here, this McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. There's a big, I found a big thing on it. You link a thing in here and talk about it a little bit. So this is number 3. And that's called the McKinney-Vento Homeless Act. Vento Act, I'm going to call it. Okay, so a link, a hyperlink to it where you found information, and then a little bit more than what's in the textbook about it. And there's just a little point. This is 1987, a little point that it doesn't always do what it's supposed to do. But the alarming part here is 9 out of 10 of the nation's homeless students are enrolled, but less than 4 in 5 attend regularly. So, highly concentrated education offers homeless children a chance to academic success. If you have kids that fall in this category, you'll find immediately that it's different. Working with these kids are different. And again, as I said before, if there's ever a group that need you, it's this group here, and my only hope is you don't have a big enough group that you can give more love and attention to them. But they need more, not less, of your attention. They're going to be successful in school. The rates at which homeless children with more traumatized in their schools, and look at this here. And so I'm going to ask you to bring this in. This will be number 4. And this will be in the clip bin. And this is called 8.2. 8.2. Bring that in and put it right behind your McKinney-Vento Act. So what are some of these programs support these low-income families in your schools? And again, I've worked with every one of these. And I'm just going to give you a quick here. Title I is federal funding to help low-income students. No Child Left Behind said teachers must be highly qualified, because the low-income schools tend to be the first ones to have not highly qualified. Head Start programs for low-income 3 to 5-year-olds have a whole child focus. Teachers collaborate with parents, health and social workers, and then free or reduced lunch families 185% at the federal poverty level or below. And here's what number 5 is going to be. You're going to embellish every one of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll say this one here you can do if you want, but 1, 2, 3, and 4 is more information. You need to look these up. There's more information in the textbook. You can use the textbook. You don't need a link, but I want you to better understand those. Okay, so that's number 5, and let's go take a look at what they are. Okay, federal legislation that seeks to provide an influx of financial support to schools, support students with low-income families, and goal of making up some of the educational disadvantages. We have low incomes at all levels of education. African American, Hispanic, and American Indian students are more likely than white or Asians to attend high poverty schools. And again, as I showed you before, there's more white kids in poverty, but percentage-wise not. And that's always a little interesting that says well as the system are more likely than white, Asian, and highly poverty schools. which make them eligible for federal funds. I say there's more white ones, but percentage-wise, so it doesn't kind of bothers me. It doesn't fit their narrative, but I'm telling you, there's more white kids in poverty than others. It just by percentage of the disrepresentation of these other groups, a lower representation of white kids, but absolutely more. Urban areas have twice as many high poverty schools as suburban areas, and you knew that too. Our inner cities tend to be just more cluttered with them. Section summarizes some of the programs likely encountered in these schools. Title I here goes through it. I'm going to let you study this and bring this in. And again, I say on this here, a nice report on here, at least 2 sentences for each one of what they're about. And Head Start is here. I have a relative, in fact, I'll say it's a close relative that was involved with Head Start. Designed for children on low-income families by addressing the needs of the whole child, in addition to educating 3 and 5-year-old children. To also work with social workers, nurses, other health professionals. Teachers and social workers have periodic home visits to work with parents in this. And here was what my relative thing was, is the house was a mess, and that's what they heard every time this person they came was, clean this up. It wasn't a safe environment for kids. And so that was a great involvement for them, because they didn't hear that. They didn't see it that way. Nobody ever said that to them, and they were obviously a little put out by it. And I wish I could say it changed everything. It didn't. Head Start children receive breakfast and lunch daily at school, free, of course, along with the work and academic skills Head Start. So they're identified by income, and they start out on they work with academics, but they really focus on the whole family, the whole child, because often it's a family problem. Then free reduced lunches, as you know, it talks about this has been around forever, and it says 185% of poverty right here. I want you to bring that in. It's $42,000 for a family to qualify for this. So anything under $42,000, which is quite a high number when you consider most of our teachers don't make that. And so I can say to you that I got free lunch when I was growing up back in the 60s, because my family didn't begin to meet the poverty guidelines. That serve free lunches also have breakfast, fruits, milk, and like that. Continue providing food through the summer. The summer programs now free meals. I know in Sioux Falls now anybody, and this is all federal money, any kid can come and get the free lunches in the summer. And that was last summer was the first time here in Sioux Falls that anybody of school age could show up and get a free lunch. And as I told you, now in Boston, I heard in Dallas, Texas also, they're now providing free breakfast and a free lunch to all the kids in the district, and all of the Boston school district and all the Dallas school district, and I'm sure there's others across the country. The only thing I would say is, where's that money coming from? But somebody else is paying. You get a free lunch now and free summers. And this is interesting too. You know there's two, but in our large districts, a disproportionate number are eligible for this. And again, the reason is these big districts tend to include more low-income things. So this, let me see if I've covered that. Yes. So children left alone after school is another big part of children, communicating with parents, working with families. Most single parents work outside the home, and many two-parent families both work, as it does in this family that I'm part of. Less working parents have been lucky enough to have a job that supports a flexible schedule, allows them to be home with children, not school. They have to go to after school. As a result is children of all ages being left alone in their care of others. Parents worry about their safety of children after school. I'm going to suggest something here. Let's have this a robust discussion about this. Then why, oh why don't we match the school day to the work day? Okay, I hear this all the time. So here, I'm going to go to our page here, and I'm going to ask you that question. Here's what we're going to have a robust discussion. Okay, why don't we match the school day to the work day? And again, let's have a nice go wherever you want on this, but you gotta participate in this. Why this is. Match the work, and think of all the problems that would alleviate if we'd match the work day to the school day, and this whole section would go away. And all I'm saying is till 5 o'clock, and they could be picked up. So just like you drop your kids off at school on the way to your job, why couldn't you pick them up from school, that they're involved with school, orchestrated by the school, not after school, not walking home, anything like that, but there's some kind of orchestrated school activity till 5 o'clock. Wouldn't have to be rigorous academics, but the school would orchestrate the thing. Not after school programs, not parents, not latchkey kids, simply the school. And maybe we could improve learning. Nobody talks about that. Try and find something anywhere about improved learning from that. Right here, because most of us had to pay a fee to have our children in child care, especially if you don't have relatives that can do it. And they give you a number here, $138 a week. I know I paid more than that when my kids were in daycare, after school programs. Children who are responsible for their own care after school experience more accidents and injuries. They also are at risk to behavior problems, low social competence, poor academic performance. And here was one of the things when my kids got to middle school, finally, they were in sports. And so every day they had something to do after school, either a game or practice or something like that. And so it was a rhythm, it was a routine, and they, at a young age, my kids got to go home and be by themselves. I still, even though they're one's in high school, middle school, I still don't like it when they're home by themselves after school. I would still rather be here or have some kind of supervision because of just what they're talking about here, that the likeliness of these risky activities, smoking, drinking, drugs, sex, all this incidence is way higher. Do you realize the highest crime time for middle school kids is from 3:30 to 5. Middle school kids commit more crimes in the age of between time of 3:30 and 5:30 than any other time of the day. Okay, that's why I think we should have school orchestration until 5 o'clock. But you push against it. You decide what you think. Educators should be sensitive to realities faced by children that are left alone, sometimes frightened at home alone, especially if they have no siblings. Home can be dangerous and scary in neighborhoods, and drugs being sold, peers, and that's another thing that would take care of that is, at least for a big part, would be that if we stayed there. Sold and peers tempting one another to misbehave. Adolescents may be tempted to experiment with drugs, sex while adults are not around. Television may become the babysitter. My thing is my kids come home as they raid the cupboards and eat garbage. I get home to cook a meal for them and they're not hungry. Because they've raided the cupboards and stuff, and that's why I don't like it when they're home, because I want to feed them a good meal. I know that's whiny, but that's the way it is. Okay, packed after school, stay with relatives, fend for themselves, accidents, behavior problems, poor academics, more likely to smoke, drink, use drugs, and you can put this one on here, and sex at that time. Should be sensitive to these realities. What number was that? That was number 6. You get to add that on here. Right? And dangers children and youth face. Let's take a look at that. And this is what they're going to talk about: child abuse, neglect, sexual harassment, cyberbullying, and cyberbullying, and suicide. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those. I'm going to ask you to do this and carry this. Number 7 is these dangers: child abuse, neglect, harassment. I'm going to give you a little bit, but that you will fill this out yourself, number 7. And let me give you this, and I want to see clearly what you have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of those. Most children have probably been faced with angry parents who raise their voice or even spank them on occasion. I'm going to ask you about this, and don't get all freaked out about this, but I'm going to say, were you spanked? You've been spanked on occasion. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this on our page here at the bottom, and it looks like this. Just pull everywhere, and there's a little number right here that you're going to put in the thing. So you go pick up your phone and go to texting, and in the texting, who it's to now, you put this top little number in here, 22. It's hard for me to see it here. (22333). So I put that in here, 22333, and then in the message you put this number for yes, and this number for no. And so I'm going to do it to show you how it works. I send it. It acknowledges that it's been sent. And there it is. So yes, I was spanked. And again, I don't want to freak you out with this or anything, but this is what I'm going to say just to get a feel. And it's all the classes. I teach several sections, and it'll all show up on here. And just see how many were spanked. Now, my kids, I can remember spanking each of them once. And they're now, as I'm recording this, they're 13 and 15. And I can only remember spanking each of them once. And I can remember my little guy was about 3 at the time, and he would not go to bed. He was horsing around, and I gave him a good spank. And he was kind of whimpering. Come in there later, and he said, "Dad, you don't take very good care of me." And so it was kind of a funny moment, but he would say, yes, he was spanked. But you respond to this. How many of you were spanked as children? That would correspond to the textbook here, and that is no way deal where we're going. However, some family members seriously hurt children. Child abuse is reported annually from more than 3 million children. More than 84 children per hour are treated in emergency rooms. 1 in every 109 children is the victim of abuse. Again, seems high to me. Most 4 in 5 victims of abusing from neglect, and I think that's a very a good one, and I've told you that before, but the number one type of abuse is neglect, what means the child is not being provided his or her basic needs. And here's the thing with that. You will have to decide at what level of neglect is too much, because once you report, you can't really unring a bell. And so you decide. It was my biggest challenge in this area is kids coming, and kids, it seems like kids that I worked with are always hungry, but the one that I couldn't come to grips with is when they were dirty, unbathed, and clothes weren't washed. And I'll tell you a quick story. One time I took a jacket off a kid wore his jacket in the same pants. He had a starter shirt, starter jacket, a nice pair of jeans, wore the same ones day after day after day, and they just got ranker and ranker. And finally I said to him, "Matt, if you got to keep doing this, we're going to have to wash them here in school." And I was a special ed teacher, taught in a classroom that had a washer and dryer in it. And the next day it was just as bad, and I physically took the jacket and washed it. It was a Dallas Cowboy jacket, and it was so gross. I'll tell you how bad it was. When the drug dogs came through, they marked his locker, and they couldn't find any drugs in there, but they felt that it was on the clothes, on the coat that he had in the locker. So he fought me, and it was a real battle to the point where he took a swing at me. But I washed it. I don't know if I'd do it again today, but this was 20 years ago. I washed it and dried it. He came in after school, and he could not believe how white it was. He went to tears on how good it looked, and he apologized for getting so mad and stuff. But it was, looking back, I thought it was the right thing. What I didn't realize at the time is what a shot at his dignity it was, especially in front of other kids. But he was very happy. But he was neglected. And a long story short, I had a lot of history with this kid. There was no washer and dryer in this family's home. There wasn't anything in their home. And so at the time I thought it was the right thing. I wouldn't do it again, but at the time I thought it was the right thing. But he was neglected. And that's the biggest one, and that will be your challenge. Some of these other ones are easy for you to see and report. But this one is hard, because what you're going to find is kids will come from homes where that's normal to look like that and be unfed and not taken care of. And the other, my bigger thing was, I've talked to you before about, was that nobody made them go to bed. They went to bed whenever they wanted to. And they got up, often were late for school or very tired in school. They were neglected that way. And I'm still, my kids are older, I'm still pretty rancorous about their bedtime. Goes on here, more than 1 in 3 of all victims are under 18 years old. High school girls, 11% are sexually abused. Boys, 5% sexually abused. Sensational news stories of abuse of children by strangers, but abusers generally are family members or intimate partners, friends, and acquaintances. And the number one group is mother's boyfriend tends to be who abuses these girls, but it doesn't play real well, so we don't talk about that. But a lot of it unreported. But you have a responsibility, and it comes down here. Not reporting could lead to fines and prison terms, and so I'm going to ask you to include that here under child abuse about the requirements to report, mandatory reporting of abuse. And what I'm going to say is, you come in here and put in here teachers and see what you come up with. And there is mandatory reporting, and I don't know, I've never heard of anybody being prosecuted for this, but if you know of abuse or suspect abuse and you don't report it, you could be prosecuted or certainly fined, lose your license, and those types of things. And so that's what I'm going to ask you to do here, is put a link, and part of this abuse, put a little explanation. And the hardest one for you will be neglect. These others are easy. And why I say it, you can't ring a bell, because once you suggest that that's a problem, can you imagine anything more insulting to a family than to suggest their child is dirty or unfed? But you're going to err on the side of taking good care of kids, and especially by the time they're in middle school, they're used to lying, they're used to covering up for it. They're not going to agree with it. But that's what you get there, abuse. Okay, sexual harassment is the next one. Range from unwelcome comments, and that's the most common, and that's why I want you to put in here. Some of this is just knucklehead stuff. Let me read this all to you, and you and I lived through this. Harassment is not rare in schools. It's common occurrence for many students. Nearly half of middle school and high school students in a national survey indicate they have been sexually harassed at school, with the majority reporting it as a negative effect of them, of course. But goes on, the harassment of both boys and girls occurs electronically via text and email or social networking too, hallways, classroom cafeterias. The harassment ranges from unwelcome comments to touching and, in some cases, physical intimidation or rape. Girls are more likely than boys to be sexually abused. LGBT students are disproportionately. The most common harassment experienced by students is verbal abuse, which includes unwanted comments, jokes, and gestures. And where's the most common place for it? Middle school is the most common place. Significant differences in the victim's sexual harassment to appear based on race, ethnicity, white background. Doesn't matter. Even the privileged white kids get harassed sexually. Low-income students report being touched in unwelcome ways more than other, more affluent ones. Again, it goes back to who's living in the home. Harassers are more likely to be male students or a group of male students. And again, if you went to middle school, any size school at all, or even maybe wherever you went to school, that's generally what it looked like. If you were to have a poster picture of what sexual harassment looks like, it would be middle school students, a group of boys harassing a boy or a girl or some LGBT student sexually. And it could be just the nature of jokes. They're trying to be funny, those kinds of things. But that's what it looks like, and it's unfortunate. And again, you get to decide what is real harassment and what is knucklehead stuff. And it comes down here, talks a little bit about cyber harassments here. Perhaps not realizing how much their actions hurt their victims. Most harassers don't think it's a big deal, or they were trying to be funny is how it came to be. And so what you do is you teach about it. Here's what the response to what they did because of harassment. Girls are more likely than boys to report being negatively impacted by this. Okay. About half of the harassed students in this study said they ignored the harasser. That's what the student just ignored them. Girls are more likely than boys to tell the harasser to stop or try to defend themselves. Boys are more likely to turn it into a joke, to ignore it. We're going to teach in school to prevent sexual harassment. Student suggests that school designate a person to whom they can talk to and provide online resources. Okay. So recommendation of students is that they allow an anonymous report an incident of victim or bystander. And again, just be very careful because you can't unring this. And what I would say to you, here's what I did continually working in a middle school, and you'll do this all, is you talk about how you have to report it. If you're doing any of this behavior, I have to report it as the teacher. So tell your students, be careful what you say, be careful of your jokes. In that middle school area is so hard because their bodies are changing. They're not sure what to do with it. The hormones are going crazy. And you as a teacher get to stand in the gap there and try and help them through that time. Bullying. Middle schools report the largest percentage of bullying incidents. Bullying may be a student who pushes them out of the lunch cafeteria line, and we see that as bullying. Again, it's knucklehead stuff. My kids would consider that bullying. For one thing, we've done these long orations on bullying in our schools that most kids are terrified now, but this is one that we'd consider. If I was marking a survey and a big kid or any kid pushed me on the lunch line, I'd say I've been bullied. Even though our culture is full of bullies now, I think the governments are bullies. I mean, it's just gotten to be a way of life. Kids and how they feel safe. And the most common place they feel bullied is in middle school age. And here, this down here is really interesting. Bullies are at an increased risk of substance abuse, poor academic performance, violence in their life. And so generally the bully has some real strong characteristics also, a true bully. But bullying and be a bully are different things. That anybody can be a bully from time to time or bully somebody. Harsh words can be seen as bullying. My son got in trouble one day in one of these long, intense discussions about bullying. He asked the question, can teachers bully students? Which he was promptly escorted to the office to see the principal for misbehaving in class. Apparently, and it was a group of teachers, but I saw no humor. Certainly didn't think that was a viable question. Don't you think teachers could bully students? This is what I'm saying. Their school is built on a culture of bullying, and yet we've done these long things about anti-bullying stuff. So he did not understand it, and of course, it made him think less of his school and of his teachers the way that was handled. Victims are increased risk of experiencing anxiety, depression. Thing also occurs electronically. Bullying does. Cyberbullying. There's a question on the test about cyberbullying. And again, so you're doing this. And our last one is suicide, and that's never a fun one to talk about. Oh, this last families when school authorities do not intervene to stop harassment of their children. Schools are being sued for that, I say. So you want to be on top of that. The thing that I would say to you on the bullying thing is you just don't ever want to ignore it. Even if you don't bust heads, even if you don't send somebody to the office, that everything you see that makes one kid uncomfortable, is one dominating another, is you simply mention how hurtful that can be. Because for often, people don't realize that just shoving somebody out of the lunch line is a form of bullying, and it can really make kids feel awful. And so that would be your role there, is kind of that teacher in teaching about these things. And you'll run into kids in your teaching career that are real bullies that really are out to intimidate and harass others. And I felt my oldest son especially went to school with a kid that continually harassed him. And I'll tell you, the most common thing he would do is when they made basketball teams, he goes to a big school, went to a big school, and there was an A, B, and C, and a D team, 4 different teams, and you can imagine what the difference was. Well, he made the A team, and this big kid said to him, I can't believe they even let you play. I wouldn't even put you on the D team, let alone the A team. And of course, he tried to laugh it off, came home, cried his eyes out, that somebody had said that to him, that he shouldn't even be on the D team, let alone the A team. Needless to say, he has grown up and he's bigger than that kid now and better than that kid, but at the time that kid was bigger and thought he was the best. But it was a form of bullying that went unnoticed. I urged him to tell. I wanted to go up and tell. He didn't want me to. It would make it worse. This kid will beat me up. Those kinds of things. And that's very common in middle school. And you will be the catalyst as a teacher to stand in that gap. This is interesting about suicide. And again, you want to bring this in. It's the third leading cause of adolescent death behind automobile accidents and homicide is suicide. Third leading cause. Automobile accidents, homicide, which is murder, and suicide's the third one. So you want to bring that in. This thing, 14% of high schoolers report seriously considering suicide. Previous year, 11 had a plan, 6% attempted. Here, this is interesting and highlight. Hispanic youth are more likely than their peers to commit suicide. Interesting. Male adolescents are more likely to commit suicide, but females are more likely to think about it and make non-lethal attempts. Gay teens are particularly at risk. Suicide attempts often calls for help. Teacher who does that. Suicide attempts are often precipitated by interpersonal conflicts. Being aware of the signs if you alert a health professional in that. Please also include here the warning signs. Changes in person's mood, changes in sleeping patterns, anxiety, withdrawing from friends and family. Also have these conflicts, so make sure you bring that in so you have that. So these challenges of teen years, these sexuality and pregnancy, substance abuse, economic realities, let's take a look at those. And again, please read this chapter. It's a very good read of all the things going on. Defining our sexuality as beings begins with early teens, continues through the years. Girls and women often connect sex with being accepted, being attractive, being loved. Boys then contrast that sex as status, power, domination, violence, far cry from loving relationships. Thus, ideal sexuality for men and women may differ, and that's not new. That's been around forever. Teenage sex is not prevalent as some believe. Percentage of young children who have ever had sexual intercourse has increased during the past 25 years, more than 50% to 46. Has decreased, I should say, from 50 down to 46, with males being slightly more sexually active than females. Approximately 1 in 3 high schoolers are sexually active, that is, had sex in the last 33 months. The majority of them using contraceptives. One of the results of early sexual activity is teenage pregnancy, and of course that goes with a whole bunch of other things. Although the number of teenage pregnancies and births has been declining, the rate in the United States remains one of the highest among industrialized nations. And of course, this next part here, poverty appears to be the most important factor in determining teenage mothers. In other words, what's so interesting about that is how that's perpetuated from generation to generation, because so many of these low-income mothers were teenage mothers, and then it's perpetuated. And I can tell you, when I was teaching in the middle school, how ritualistic that was, that the mothers of the kids were very, very young. And you do a little math and you could quickly figure out a lot of these mothers were teenagers when they had the kids that I was working with. But it's a key risk factor of pregnancy, but it's damaging impact that we buffered through strong social networks. Most unmarried teenage mothers continue to live with their parents, but their families are disproportionately low income. So I say most teenage parents come from low-income families. Reducing family poverty has also reduced teenage pregnancy. Many teenage parents, especially mothers, are forced to take adult responsibilities much earlier than societies expect. And I'll tell you what my take on that is. It isn't the baby time. It's those toddler times, and the little ones really need guidance, instruction, and teaching is what's absent when the parents are too young. Teenage mothers are sometimes forced to fend for themselves in impoverished condition. Their own parents can't provide or no support. The fathers of their children are often absent, either not contributing or unable to contribute financially. Poverty also contributes to the births of babies with low birth weights, babies who are more likely than other children to experience health problems, developmental delays, abuse, neglect. All of those things go with that early pregnancy. Girls and women more connect sex with being accepted, Poverty is the risk for teen pregnancy, and teens are becoming more responsible about sexual activity. And of course, they're much more likely to drop out, not continue. Overall, teenagers are becoming more responsible about their sexual activity, are using a contraceptive to reduce the risk of pregnancy, transmission of disease, and sexually transmitted disease. School programs such as sex ed and health clinics are helpful, but they are not always supported by families and communities. I wonder what that means. However, the programs that have proven most effective are the ones convince teenagers they should either practice abstinence or use contraceptives consistently. As many young people struggle with the development of their sexuality, they may seek guidance from teachers like you. There's a question on the test, that's why I highlighted that, about that's not supported. And all that means is some families want to do that themselves, want to deal with themselves, and have a different message than what the schools and communities have. And there's all kinds of stuff about that. But there's a question on the test, and I want you to get that right. And then substance. And there's been much written about this, and you had to be asleep not to heard some of it. Public attitudes for public schools. Respondents rank drugs as the 5th greatest problem public schools face behind funding, discipline, overcrowding, and fighting. And I wholeheartedly disagree. I've never seen students say funding was a problem. That's just so interesting here that we think funding is a problem, because people can't even name what the funding would do, but they see that as they list it here as the top here. Very interesting. But discipline, but drugs. And I think it's subsided some from what it was, but my kids say that's so prevalent that even in the middle school, parents worry about drug use interfering with their child's ability to function effectively. Drug use may lead to cutting school, hanging out with the wrong crowd, being arrested, and chemical dependency that require professional treatment. A large percentage of teenagers try one or more drugs, but alcohol is still their favorite. And there's a question on the test, what's the biggest one? It's alcohol, still the most available, being used more as twice as often as other drugs. And they're just going back to this survey, 2011 Phi Delta Kappa Gallup Pulse survey. Half of our high school seniors at some time tried an illicit drug, usually marijuana. And that's a little alarming that half have tried drugs and it's marijuana, even though most don't consider themselves regular users. Younger students are experimenting with drugs, but the rate of illicit drugs of 8th graders has been declining since '96. 1 in 16 8th graders are already smoking cigarettes. Seems a little high to me. Tried illicit drug, and I want you to put that here as marijuana. I can't even remember what number we're on here. Number 8. Number 8 is marijuana here. Okay. 1 in 16 cigs. Put that with number 8. Bad news is higher rates of non-medical use of prescription painkillers, Vicodin, oxycodone, and stuff like that. Okay, so here I'm going to clip this also and have you bring it into the notes right here. So we'll clip that and bring it right here. This will be number 9. It's a clip. 8.7. Okay. And what are the economic realities for these kids? Well, I'm in the highlight. I'm reading this highlight. 68% of high school graduates go to college immediately after high school. Okay, 68%. All right. Although African Americans are 66, Hispanics are 60. Students enroll immediately after high school at lower rates than whites. So 70% of whites. Difference also exists in enrollment in college by families. Socioeconomic status. 52% of low-income students go to college immediately. 67% of middle-income. 82% of high-income students. Females make up 57% students enrolled in college, which is, of course, more than half. Down here, the percentage of high schoolers working today is 20%, points less than 2 decades ago. 16% high schoolers age 16 and older worked while attending school, with more females than males. And I think that's on the test also. 16% work. Okay, and here's what I know about that is I'd like to see my kids work, but in this day, if you're going to be in sports, there isn't any time. You do sports every night. They both do 3 sports, so it's year-round, it seems like. It goes on to say here there's a little more employment in the summer, but that's somewhat unusual. Talks about the lack of opportunities for some folks. After-school jobs are particularly beneficial to students in low-income families, do not have family school connections. Unfortunately, many students could derive long-term benefits from working while in high school, especially those in the inner cities, have limited access to jobs. The lack of employment opportunities contributes to low esteem, pessimism, stuff like that. Okay. So that's the economic realities. And then we get into more victimhood, this prejudice and discrimination. A democratic society is built on the principles of society equally and respect the individuals within it. However, many persons of color, limited English speakers, women, persons with disabilities, and people low incomes, and people affiliated with religions other than Christianity. I find that so interesting. They single out the Christians. You, if you're a Christian, are not discriminated against, and I beg to differ, and I think you'll get the chance to attest to that when you're going to be held under extreme duress to say whether you're a Christian or not, you believe in Jesus or not, and you'll get your chance. If it's not here now, it will be in the future. But it lists all these folks that are discriminated against, even religious people except Christians. And that's what I'm not sure why I would even go there, but that fits the narrative of these authors through the whole textbook, so they did. So, I experience equally as other members of society. Power relationships among the groups influence young people's perception of themselves. And so they're big on this, power relationships. And members of the group. Schools are one example of institutions in which power relationships exist. Students' work and class rules are determined by teachers. Listen to this now. This is really interesting. Teachers are evaluated and disciplined when necessary by principals, who report to superintendent of schools. Stay with me now. This is the hierarchy they're getting to. The rules and procedures for managing schools traditionally have been established by authorities who are not directly involved with school and who may not live in the community served by the school. Here, the highlighted part. Parents, especially economically disadvantaged areas, often feel powerless in the education of their children. And power allows access. And I'm telling you, folks, I often feel powerless. I see see things that you just feel powerless over to change or even acknowledge. And at times when I have brought up things, I felt like I was beat down by the school that my kids go to. And you'll see that too as your parents, or if you're parents now, you'll see things, injustices that you think should be corrected. And but I know when I worked in this middle school, these low-income families really felt powerless and overwhelmed and even intimidated by school. And I thought one of the reasons they didn't have power is because they knew their children weren't doing well, and they knew things weren't well at home. And so it really sapped their self-esteem and their their desire to make an impact in here. So they would get very passive with schools, and at times really let us have a pass when they shouldn't have on what their kids needed. But power allows access to societal benefits such as good housing, tax deductions, best schools, social services. I don't know tax deductions, where that comes from, but and that's what, if you don't have power, you miss out on those. A more equitable sharing resources school would guarantee that students, regardless of family income or background, would have qualified teachers, sufficient books, other instructional resources, well-maintained buildings, playgrounds, access to high-level academic knowledge. Unfortunately, such quality does not exist in all of our schools. And I know there's been many, many case laws suing schools over this, that education facilities and stuff should be equal. And I know in the Sioux Falls district here about 20 years ago, they spent millions trying to make their buildings equal and have equal opportunity. And I think they've done a phenomenal job of trying to do that. But I do know there's some inequities yet in our schools. And so it does kind of hamper that situation. And it would be nice if it was a more fair distribution. So let me jump back here. Power relationships, if they feel powerless. Power allows access to these societal, such as housing, tax deductions, this. And again, like I say, I'm not sure how that fits in, but it does. Apparently it does. So let's go to prejudice. These things here, otherness, prejudice, and socialization. And so what is this otherness? The process appears to be integrally tied to the identity, which involves assigning characteristics and behaviors to members of other groups. Construction of others places on dominating or submissive role Effects of others. Some young people identify themselves in relations with young women. They exert their masculinity. So let's look at that. I know this is on the test, so make sure all these are. So otherness, prejudice are there, and you've got to have a strong feel what it is. Some some exert their masculinity over their female counterparts in academic, sports, sometimes relationship. They're not the ones who should weed powder or others, while white males in some economics build their identity upon opposition of colors of males. And again, I disagree with that, but that fits the narrative that's been through this whole book, that victimization here. I think our teachers, especially you, will do a phenomenal job of lifting up all kids, and you'll be colorblind to all these things. You'll teach kids, treat kids, and teach kids as they should be. Lots of questions on the test about prejudice. It's a preconceived negative attitude toward members of specific ethnic, racial, or socioeconomic groups. Sometimes extends to people with disabilities or different sexual orientation or gender. Such negative attitudes are based on numerous factors, including information about members of a specific group that is stereotypical and many times not true. Prejudice is individuals may have had little or no direct social contact with the members of that group. Individual prejudice may have limited negative impact on members of the other group. However, these attitudes are often passed on to their children through socialization, and I really reject that. But what the contention here that fits their narrative is you and I as parents are passing this on, and I wholeheartedly disagree. But I say it fits their narrative, and there's a question on the test about we racist and bigoted parents pass on our racism and bigotism to our kids, and the term is called socialization. Through this process, many students from low-income families and ethnic minorities are prevented from gaining the skills and knowledge necessary. Here, this is really interesting. You take a number of steps to keep your prejudice from hurting others. And again, I said I wholeheartedly reject that contention that we as teachers are racist and prejudiced, and it tells you how to contend with that. Okay. Right, that's all we're going to do with that. Discrimination. Many of your students and their family members have experienced discrimination, and there's a question on the test about that too. Excluded from equal access to housing, jobs, and educational opportunities. Discrimination is different from prejudice in that it is more than an attitude against a member of that group. And so you have to know that. What's the difference between discrimination and prejudice? Discrimination is different. It's a process that prevents members of a specific group from participating in our society. Most students of color, females, low-income, disabilities experience discrimination in aspects of their life. African Americans receive more severe sentences from the judicial system, lead to women not being paid as much as the men, etc. That's discrimination when you act on it. If we do not experience discrimination everyone experiences, we may not have a difficult time acknowledging that it exists. And again, I take offense at that. Many white students do not see themselves as advantaged or privileged in society. They do not think they receive any more benefits from society than anyone else. These students may have a difficult time fighting social injustices because they have neither experienced nor become aware of this. As a result, rights based on group membership versus are debated on college campuses, board meetings, etc. Laws that promote the support members of group maintain a superiority of power of its members. I don't know why they want to go there, but that's huge in this book. And so here, I disagree with this. The authors feel that English only is a racist thing. To speak English only. And you do what you want with that. And then racism, and you know what that is? That is based on, prevents members from participating. Racism involves a racial superiority. Potential concerns about children will be treated. Families may distrust educators and accuse them of being a racist. And I have lived through that, and that's why I guess I reject some of the contention here is, I can remember one time 2 kids got in a fight, and one was a Native American kid, and when I separated them, all it is got between them, and this kid jumped up and took a swing at me and said, "You racist," and screamed and hollered and went crazy that I was a racist for separating this fight. And he was fighting a white kid, and I didn't say a word. I just held him apart, and that was my first experience with that. And then he was raised by a grandparent. Grandparent came in and said, yes, the reason you're against my son is you're a racist. And he was pounding on a kid smaller than him. So that was my experience with that. And so like it says here, they may accuse teachers of being a racist. They don't know us, they don't know anything about us, but I was a racist. They're just standing up for their children, doing what they can to ensure that their children treated equitably and have the same opportunities in this. However, the behavior of these parents is usually incongruent with schools' view of positive, supportive parents. Teachers and school officials should avoid reinforcing parents' perception of the school as racist and not caring about success. And how do you do that? It doesn't give you that. It says it's you. Monitor your own interactions with students. And again, I think in the year 2013, this is overblown, overdone, because I have faith and confidence in you emerging teachers, that you will be colorblind and you will lift up all kids and you won't ask about that. You won't matter to you. You'll roll up your sleeves every day and do the best you can and leave all this laying on the floor where it belongs. But you can see we devoted a whole chapter to this, of contending that teachers may be racist. And so I don't worry about that you as all. Here's the other isms that you're going to understand is sexism and ableism, and you know what those are about. Let's go over here. This ableism, discrimination against persons with disabilities, sexism, devalue women. Can it not be men? Can it not be men? Could be sexist. Can we not discriminate against men for position? Well, let me give you a quick story on that, and then you can tell me to go jump in a lake or whatever. But I more than once applied for jobs as administrator in a building where they had to hire a woman because they wanted a gender balance in their administrators, and only to figure out later that they really couldn't hire a man. It had to be a woman because they had too many men on their staff. And so I felt that was a sexist thing to do, but you would never get anywhere trying to prove that. But that was a big thing, trying to prove to the world that we have a gender balance, and therefore more than once like this. We're going to have 3 principals in this building, only 2 of one gender at the most. We already have 2 men as principals. This one, regardless, is going to be a woman. And therefore, you don't need to apply for it if you're a man, because it's not going to be a man. Now, you can't say it out loud. It's just the way it was, and it was unspoken. And so, but that's what those are. And then engagement in school is this last part. We're getting to the last part. Who leaves school early? This is interesting here, and there's a thing on the test about 10% of schools have been labeled dropout factories in which less than 60% of their students graduate on time. Isn't that interesting? 10% of schools are labeled dropout factories. Maybe I missed something here. The problem is particularly critical in large urban segregated schools where African American, Native American, and Hispanic students have only about 50% chance of completing high school, placing them at great risk of not earning substantial wages in employment of adults. And that's really the big thing, is once they don't finish school, their chances of successfully participating in society goes crazy. School districts with low graduation rates are often more often in central cities with disproportionately high numbers of low-income and immigrant families. Of the 15,500 high schools, at least with at least 10 seniors, 10% have been labeled dropout factories. And so, for the most part, you don't want your child going to a school that's a dropout factory where 60% don't graduate on time. Graduation rates vary across ethnic groups. Figure this here is the one, and again I'm going to ask you to bring this in your notes, and so we're going to put this right here. What number is this? 10. Number 10. Number 10, and bring in 8.8 from the clips. Okay. And so by different races and stuff, of course, white are higher, but here's this group again that causes us problems. These Asian Americans have a disproportionate number. They're much higher than even the white percentage. African American, I'm a little surprised that African Americans are have a lower graduation on time rate than the Native Americans, because in South Dakota that's not true. Then here this also will come, here's our discussion, is retention better than social promotion for students? And again, I don't want you to have an opinion on this until you've read both sides, and so I'm going to go and put that on our discussion now, right here. Okay, that is your second one, and that goes right here. Also, that'll be our number 11. Discuss. Okay. Only 50% of students with disabilities complete high school, and that's a very low number. And of course, with disabilities, such a range of kids, from very severely disabled to kids with very mild disabilities. Only 22% of persons with disabilities who are 16 or older are in the workforce, and that's the alarming part to you and me. Again, is they don't get to contribute in their society when they drop out. One might expect students who complete high school are more likely than dropouts to be employed by age 25. 62% of high school graduates without a college degree are in the labor force, as 46%. So even without college, 62% compared to 46% if they drop out. So, when you see 46, it's less than half. 62 is not a high number, but 46 is really a bad number. By age 25, more education does not make a difference. 77% of college graduates are working. More education does make a difference. 77% of college graduates are working, earning double the income of high school graduates who do not attend college. And here's the key: is the 9th grade, and that this says here, 9th grade is a critical period for dropping out, because that's when they decide. And so if you're teaching middle school, early high school, a lot of this you'll have a chance to impact this. It talks about here the national initiatives to dramatically decrease the dropout rate by 2020, and I want you to bring those in here, and that's going to be your number 12. And I'm just going to say national initiatives on the bottom of page 216. And you'll see the like Colin Powell's fingerprints on here and what those rates are, what they're hoping to achieve here. Increasing the number of students reading at a proficiency by 4th grade, reducing chronic absenteeism, providing sustained and quality adult peer support for students who need it. Plan calls for states to raise compulsory attendance to age 18, which over 30 states have, and of course we have already compulsory attendance to 18. And I think Sioux Falls School District has done some great things to work with kids that normally would have dropped out. Then resiliency here as personal attributes give some students strengths and fortitude to overcome obstacles, and self-efficacy is can handle the change. And here there's a little more on self-efficacy. I want you and have good social skills, and so that I want you to bring that in here also. This will be number 13 as you finish this, because there's a question on the test about what is self-efficacy. Okay. And this you know to be true. Higher family SES, remember what that stands for? Contributes to positive resiliency. I'm going to put that here as number 14. Is what is SES? SES. Okay. Positive, but not require other positive factors are family members who are involved in their children, providing caring environments, help children with homework, attend to grades and stuff like that. They also help by quality educational rec opportunities in their school and neighborhoods, regardless of challenges they face. They're usually social, optimistic, energetic, cooperative, inquisitive, attentive, helpful, punctual on task. And then it does a nice job here talking about how technology can help with that. and how they do. And again, it's MetLife is all over it. It's interesting here when they talk about how important this is, when earlier we were talking about how not all had access to it. And so make a case to give more access. Teachers in low poverty schools are more likely to have students use technology to prepare written text. And this is interesting. It's interesting how we've switched to this terminology, low poverty schools. The whole conversation about high poverty, but suddenly we switched the terminology here. Are more likely to have students use technology to prepare written text and develop multimedia presentations, while teachers in high poverty schools are more likely to use it to students learn to practice basic skills. Almost twice as likely to use technology to communicate with parents. Can I make a plea for that? One of the things we can say, and it's made a great case in here, is how not all have that technology. But I'm telling you, one of the things we like to do then is punish the rest of the kids from this in the name of fairness. If we say it's not fair, we don't command, we don't require, we don't instruct kids to use the technology that's available to them, because it's not fair that everybody has it. And I would pray and hope that we get past that 90% of the kids do have access, so let's go ahead and use technology in our learning, even at home, rather than continually to impede their learning because it's not fair to the other 10%. And one of the things I think we're doing to our kids today, our middle kids, is continually holding them back in the name of fairness. So rather than lifting up the bottom, we hold the others back. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, seen this, and it really hit home with my own kids, is you can't, because not everybody has that. And it goes on to talk about how important this is. Down here I highlighted this. All students spend time needed, especially if a classroom has limited number of computers. Thus, the teacher may be tempted to assign homework that requires using the internet. Problem with assigning homework on the internet, however, is not that all students have computers at home. Even if the assignment does not require the use of the internet, those students who have access at home have an advantage in compelling. So that's what I'm saying. So if there's an advantage, then we don't do it. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that, because I think you're impeding the other kids. And here's the other thing I'll say. Now these low-income families all have free phones from the government, and they're often they're smartphones, and they have the access data plans. In fact, in one survey I saw said they had more access, better smartphones than kids that came from middle-income families. But it's not mentioned here. It doesn't fit the narrative they're trying to make continuously here. But I'm going to say to you, deal with that on the other end. Use the technology. Assume they have it. Because more have it than you think or have access. If you're teaching in a low-income school, that's one thing, but you get to know and work with these families, you'll come up with solutions. And rather than impede your whole class and your whole school with this attitude, I'd go ahead and find a way to use the technology and get kids going, because going forward, even the kids from low income are going to be better served if have better command of technology. And so put it in there, and I think it's a great equalizer for a lot of these kids. So don't hide behind the fact that they don't all have it, because if they don't, they can get access, and you can certainly work with them for after school things and stuff, so that they can use the school access and stuff. Because many of the schools, more and more are growing where they will have one. We won't go by classrooms. Each kid will have one. And so then you're going to be left behind. The kid's going to be behind if you don't have a better attitude about that. And parent involvement are critical to the development of good communication with parents. More proactive, engaging, regular, and consistent communication with families has long been considered vital to success students. Email, short newsletter, written notes, regular communication, and I think that's really important. I never feel like there's enough communication with teachers. They're overwhelmed. You get to our schools, they're seeing 150 different kids a day. Again, they go back to MetLife here. They found that parents want to be connected there for having a child is having academic, health, or social problems. And I'd really like to talk about it every day. I know that's not possible. One of the things it says down here, teachers are dependent on mail, phone, and this. I don't think so. I think phone has been outgrown, at least in my world and the people I know. Please send some digital text first before you call, because I, like you, am busy and I can't always handle a phone call, even at night. And so there's all kinds of ways. And one of the things I'd encourage you to do is use websites, things that I can go to. The hardest thing for us to handle at our house is notes, is paper things. What's way better for us is digitize things, because what's a lot more likely, number one, we can get our hands on it when you send it to us instead of running through kids, and number two, we can find it. I can store it. I can always do searches for it. If it's a piece of paper, a note that way, it gets put in a pile with a ton of other junk around here and never really comes to fruition again. So it talks about homework here also, how important it is, how you can really use these websites and stuff now, and these technology tools. And that's what my kids did. Every assignment is there. Everything they need is there. That won't ever be an excuse to connect. And often these teachers of our kids will take emails and stuff at night and weekends and stuff if we need to communicate with their learning. Families are more likely to volunteer to assist teachers in engaging families. That's what this is all about too. Know the community expectations for how parents should assist them, improving theirs. Parents are more engaged. And one of the things it talks about here is how low-income families have a hard time getting away from their jobs. So what I would do is create weekends and evening involvement for those in your school. Have things you want to see, get the kids excited, have some in-school things after school that are orchestrated to you by the teachers, not by an administrator, not by some outside thing, but a teacher that's going to have some kind of an after-school gathering or talk or something, and let these folks come and get to know you in that way. The 6 types of parent involvement I'm also going to clip. It's going to be your last thing here. I'm going to say it's import this clip into your notes from page 220. What number was this on again? I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that. 15. So number 15 is you're going to import this about parent involvement on page 220. Alright, it talks about different ways to do that. There you have it, Chapter 8, working with the families.